This is the morning of Friday, the 25th of September 2020. And this is the part A of the world exclusive KHOODEELAAR campaign, Diagnosis of Fleet Street, the street of shame, as Private Eye calls it, and the street of shame that has existed as the main brainwashing kind of street for the majority of the gullibles, indigenous, white English persons, to their great cost. The indigenous white persons are the capital of these lying papers and organs. And we shall be talking about the failures of so-called socialist alternatives that have never, as I said in 1981, in the left out of the media, loom the so-called socialists, and there are about 20 different factions calling themselves all socialist, left, revolutionary, semi-revolutionary, and the rest, including the CPGB's Morning Star. The Morning Star boasts to be the world's only English language daily paper of the left. It has left all substance out of that claim. There is no such truth. There is nothing in that boast, but the Morning Star appears as a kind of daily. And it is as empty as its nearest counterpart, which is operated by a thing called Socialist Workers' Party, as empty, as bereft of, as devoid of substance, as callous about the distinction between their claims and their behavior and their conduct. The CPGB Morning Star is as racist as the SWP or the Socialist Workers' Party. And there are other variations, so-called rivals. None of them is socialist. None of them is coming anywhere near telling the truth that needs to be told to counter the lies of the Daily Express and the rest of this street of shame. And the Daily Star, which is part of the same kind of background as the Daily Express, because it was also owned by the porn billionaire, Dirty Desmond, Richard Desmond, who has been in the news about the corruption and bribery of the Conservative Party in order for the Dirty Desmond being allowed a kind of illegal and corruptly intended planning permission to build the big housing degeneration complex on the site of the so-called West Ferry Road print works, based in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, but located in what is now called the Docklands, actually used to be called the Isle of Dogs, which has been given exclusive exploitation and antisocial use to be made of the area at the expense of the people, ordinary people and electors in Tower Hamlets, who remain collectively known to this day and have been known for decades, if not longer, if not for centuries, as if not the most deprived borough in the UK, but as one of the most deprived boroughs in the UK. So this is the Murdoch scum. And yesterday's news about Harold Evans had a piece about Harold Evans regretting a sentence about Harold Evans, reportedly regretting after the events that he did not challenge Rupert Murdoch's ownership of the Times newspaper. Evans was the editor of the Times and he left the employment when Murdoch took over or was about to take over. So Thursday's news about Harold Evans, who has been praised fulsomely by most papers and most news outlets, had this piece that he didn't challenge, he regretted not having challenged Murdoch. Now look at this, how the Murdoch kind of peddling and parading and kind of shoring up Boris Johnson. And it calls him PM. This PM is not suitable word. It should be Johnson. PM kind of imposes on the viewer and the reader an immoral kind of image, immorally placed image that is not deserved by Boris Johnson. And it is the patriotic thing. It is the patriotic thing that the Murdoch is drumming dishonestly and corruptly, and with the sole purpose of keeping the gullibles brainwashed. And they're quoting Boris Johnson as a source of wisdom and honesty and advice and lecture. Now they are also running a campaign by Trump against Meghan Markle and Harry. So Donald Trump is against Meghan Markle and Harry. That should be enough evidence of the moral case. And there is a piece, reluctant piece, on page 8, a licensed law trader, also known as a black barrister, was mistaken for a defendant 3 times in one day. Alexandra Wilson, 25, said her experience had left her absolutely exhausted. Criminal and family barrister Miss Wilson arrived at court on Wednesday and was asked by a security officer for her name. Ordeal, Barrister Alexander. So he could find it on the list of defendants. When she explained who she was, the officer apologized and Miss Wilson tried to shrug it off as an innocent mistake. But when she tried to enter a courtroom, she was mistaken for a defendant again, this time by a member of her own profession. Once inside, she tried to approach a prosecutor to discuss a case, but the court clerk insisted she leave the room and asked if she had representation. So this is the tip of the iceberg. Remember what we have been saying on this program, this channel, that the English judicial bureaucracy is a corrupt, racist bureaucracy. We shall have more on that later. And there is this. So the Sun running that is itself a historic piece of news. And they're having a plug for Rishi's latest kind of denial. And it's saying that COVID cases up, 40 dead. Now, that should be on the headline, on the front page, not PM backing the Sun campaign. But that shows the complete corrupt and dishonest modus operandi, followed by the dirty diggers, scum. And then it is celebrating again on page 10, the Sun says, a new lifeline being given by the Johnson-fronted cabal's so-called finance minister, Rishi Sunak, who is actually curtailing and cutting the help that most people in lowest income and insecure about joblessness are being denied help, while he is actually helping the big businesses, big moneyed owners and operatives and criminals of hedge funds and that kind of description. And there is a plug for the vaccine. There is a vaccine lobby at full throttle. And on page 18 is a very short piece about Harold Evans. Let's see what he says. Well, they don't mention the fact that he left the Times in order to avoid working for Rupert Murdoch, let alone mention the regret he expressed, according to other reports, of not challenging and opposing Murdoch's taking over the Times. Of course, there was a lot of anger at Evans not campaigning at the time by other opponents of Murdoch taking over the Times, and the move to Wapping. Now the Times here, today's Times, is reluctantly running this story, the headline, which the Sun is not at all even conceding. This headline is Job Fears as Chancellor Scales Back Rescue Plan. And then it quotes him, I cannot save every business. And there is a piece on the top, which we shall examine another time, about UK to ban far sales when the UK leaves the EU. Are they saying that the EU is stopping the banning of far sales? That is the question we shall be examining. Now, this is not true because he's not scaling back, he's actually cutting, severely cutting the help. Limited, but help it was that was available to the lowest end of the so-called business, smallest businesses, majority of whom are in low income and low profit and no profit at all. So his main support remains dedicated to backing the big business criminals and gangs of criminals disguised as banks and others and money launderers. That's what he is doing. And there is a piece as if the conservatives were bothered about what they're doing. Cameron splashes out on a £50,000 heated pool. David Cameron appears to be sparing no expense, with plans to build a heated outdoor swimming pool at his 1.5 million Cotswolds home. Well, I mean, no crisis for David Cameron, the one that brought Brexit. And the one that launched the anti-Muslim hate campaign in February 2011, months after he got in, with the collusion of Sikh Clegg of the Lib Dems shoring him up. He took over as PM and he launched the anti-Muslim and anti-the-poor campaign and agenda and manifesto of his own from the platform available to him and other conservatives and racists at a location in Tower Hamlets in East London, the deprived borough, remember? He abused the stage offered to him by the pliant, racist criminals controlling the Toynbee Hall in Commercial Street, London E1. 28 Commercial Street, London E1. The same Toynbee Hall had been used for a long time by serial criminals, including John Profumo, who was repeatedly and regularly mentioned as saving the East End poor from his association with Toynbee Hall. Nobody saw him. For over decades of visiting the location for reasons of public meetings and gatherings, I never saw John Profumo nor heard of him anywhere near Toynbee Hall. So the Toynbee Hall was used by David Cameron to mount the attack on the Muslims and also the attack on the poor, an attack on the so-called welfare society and on the multi-ethnicity of society, both of which are complete myths. The UK is not a welfare society, never has been. The so-called social security that is available to people is a fraction of what they need and have always been a fraction of what they need. And it's a completely criminal assertion for any speaker or politico to say that the UK is a welfare state. Poverty is created by the state. Poverty is created by the state, which is an agency of big business. So the creation of the poverty, intentionally created poverty, is integrally linked with the business plans of the big criminals operating the agenda of fleecing the public, the collective public resources and public wealth. And there is no sign in the promotion of Rishi Sunak in the Sun or the Express of that even having existed at all ever. When they refer to the welfare state, they talk about the big bill, the big sum of money that they claim is paid by the DWP to the poorest and the vulnerable, and their line goes, the benefit cheats and the dishonest people, and they always associate dishonesty. They associate dishonesty almost exclusively with people in poverty and hardship, while they excuse the big biggest robbery done every day against society, against the rights of the poor and the rights of the people in low income and at work by the big business. And this issue of private eye, the one that is dated now today, which is number 1531, dated today, the 25th of September to 8th of October. This issue contains an item. On which page does it contain the item about the DWP? And we shall put that in context. The DWP, the welfare state, the lies about the existence of a welfare state, the lies about the big budget kind of allocation for welfare state payment. And this is the piece that I'm looking for, the piece which is about the DWP. Giving nightmares to a seriously ill person. And only paying them any kind of amount of welfare benefit after the DWP was contracted by the private eye itself. So it was a kind of, all right, this is the piece that they have on page 38 of private eye. This is the issue dated today, a fortnight up to the 8th of October 2020. So they have on page 38 this piece about disability benefits. And they put the case of a person who suffers from iatrogenic Cushing's syndrome, which means her adrenaline glands no longer work and she suffers muscle weakness, heart disturbances, fluctuating blood pressure, and substantial weight gain. It leaves her, according to her medics, very vulnerable to life-threatening Edisonian crisis. Insufficient levels of cortisone requiring emergency hormone injection treatment and sometimes hospitalization. So she was suffering and they paid her only £23.60 a week, the lower mobility rate, to help with the additional course of getting around. And it was done by an assessor from the Atos. Atos is a repeatedly discredited corporate outfit employed by the DWP to penalize and to harass and traumatize victims of poverty and victims of DWP deprivation, want and poverty. After the I contacted the DWP, it replied to say that having received new evidence, within quotation marks, from the person's doctor, it was awarding her the higher rate of daily living, £89, and mobility allowance, that is £62 payments. Now, that is rare. Thousands of victims of the DWP underpaying, severely underpaying, and traumatizing victims of poverty and the DWP abuse suffer without any help or intervention from newspapers or magazines or publications. And this is the fact. There is no corresponding account of the state of poverty in this country in the Times or any of the papers today. despite the fact that the Times is running this item about Cameron splashing out on a heated pool at his 1.5 million pounds house or home in the Cotswolds. There should be, and there isn't. There should be coverage in the papers every day of everyday poverty, deprivation, denial of rights, and denial of the duties owed to the people by the state and by the state agencies. But there is not. The only time there is any news, any coverage, is when 1 out of a million case occurs of a person being found to have been paid too much or have been caught in going on holiday while still on benefit. It is physically impossible, materially impossible for people on low income and low income to go on holidays. That is absolutely not possible. Going on holidays involves 10,000 or more. Even if it involves half of that, people on benefit, so-called, cannot have that money, even in a year, to spare. So that is an ongoing, recurring injustice in this society. And there is no sound, there is no indication of that being an unjust system, an injustice, raging injustice against people from the forensic kind of scrutineer of government action, also known as AKA, also known as Keir Starmer, the current frontman, at the expense of the Labour Party and at the expense of the country. Starmer is every day issuing a surprise after surprise after surprise, as if the latest surprise he perpetrated the previous day was not shocking and stupid enough. The whole shebang he staged this week of remotely addressing the Labour Party annual conference was riddled with stupidities, denials, corruption, and racism. And that is only a tip of the iceberg. The rest of it is even worse. And while the right-wingers, the Murdochs and the others controlling Fleet Street are giving him positive kind of poll performance, that he is under his kind of so-called leadership or frontage of the Labour Party, the difference in terms of poll ratings, the popular opinion, public opinion poll rating between the Conservatives and the Labour Party has become marginal, minimal. It's very small difference, if any. And they also give him quite transparently, manifestly, dishonestly, they are giving him better rating than Boris Johnson on a personal level. So the question is, what is the evidence? What questions are they putting, and why are they putting these questions to the people who are rating him personally as more reliable than Boris Johnson? Put it in perspective. Anyone compared to Boris Johnson would find it quite easy to come across as being potentially more competent and caring than Boris Johnson. So the newspapers and the media are lying, as is the Times today, because the Times front page says the job fears as Chancellor scales back rescue plan. That is the more accurate headline. But look at that. Inside they say, business hails Sunak's bravery. Hail is a very bad word. Hail is the hailing Hitler, Nazi, fascist. Hail is the wrong word to use in any case. So business hailing Sunak. So if there is the headline on the front page of the Times saying that job fears as Chancellor scales back rescue plan, then how can business congratulate him? As I said, the whole scheme or the scam being covered or reported by, peddled by, promoted by the Fleet Street organs, promoting the image of Boris Johnson's kind of regime, is false. Because what Sunak has been doing with the collusion, complicity, and command of the cabal that actually he is a member of, is to help big business criminals and banks and others while cutting help that was minimally, tokenistically available to the lowest income people and the lowest earning people and groups and businesses, very small businesses. And there is a shocking admission, which is not just confined to the Times, but it has been on the websites on the internet, that a small number of people self-isolate, people who have been found to have symptoms of the virus. And there are similar stories from abroad. Now, the Times has got a page 21 piece about Harold Evans. And they've got a piece about this black barrister mistaken for defendant 3 times. And the rare case of a Muslim porter at a 5-star country hotel has won £2,300 compensation after an employment tribunal ruled his bosses unfairly swapped a bottle of cognac for cheap chocolate in a raffle. That is a rare thing, and we shall be coming to more analysis on the legal system and the tribunal awarding that sum at all. So Harold Evans is being mentioned in the Times piece on page 21. But it doesn't obviously mention the fact that he regretted not opposing Murdoch's takeover of the Times when he was forced to leave. And there are 2 pages of the obituary on the Evans. And there are 2 pages on and see if they actually mention. We shall look at that at a later edition. To see if they are mentioning the fact that he regretted not confronting, not opposing Murdoch's takeover of the Times. So the Times obituary is not mentioning that Murdoch was the wrong one to take over the Times. In fact, it's blaming Evans for creating revolt among Times readers after he took over, following William Rees-Mogg's resignation. Rees-Mogg actually resigned in protest against Murdoch's takeover of the Times. So instead of saying that Evans regretted not having confronted Murdoch, they are putting the opposite side, which is exactly what Evans predicted the Times would become, a mouthpiece for Rupert Murdoch. And it is doing this in the 2 pages long obituary. They're blaming Evans, not Murdoch, exactly as Murdoch would like. And so therefore, the Daily Mail is concerned about Meghan and Harry blowing £250,000 on an African trip. £250,000 is a significant amount of money, of course, but they are not bothered about the waste of money by the others in the royal kind of crew. So they've got 2 pages about 250,000. Now 250 billion is being wasted and stolen by the big business under any pretext, regular pretext and excuse given by the Tories. No concern about that. And Simon Walters is focusing on the contradiction between Johnson and Sunak. And Henry Deeds is saying that there may be kind of dispute and trouble at number 10 Downing Street between Johnson and Sunak. And they're saying 9 billion scheme won't stop job cuts. That's it. That is the kind of backhanded confession that this is all a scam. And there are other items, but none of that is about actual state of health and state of the readiness and availability and relevance of the care, medical care and health care that is actually available on the ground to people. And then there is a piece against the UK giving foreign aid to China. A decade after MPs said they stop sending your cash to the superpower. Now, that is not just about China. They are always against giving foreign aid, even to the countries that need help. They're not talking about, they're never talking about the huge $1 trillion pounds worth of poverty and hunger and deprivation being caused in most of the countries that are in receipt of, quote, British aid. They paint British aid as the exclusive kind of out of this world presentation by a country whose help these other people don't deserve, and most of these other people are in Africa and Asia, of course, and in the Caribbean. They paint the countries being given so-called British aid as undeserving. In any case, at every kind of occasion, at every kind of excuse they level, they deny that Britain owes any obligation to help the people in those countries. And there are problems because according to the various agreements, declarations, charters, and treaties that the UK remains signed up to, every country with an economy, gross GDP measured economy like the UK, has to make substantial contributions. Not substantial enough, but has to make substantial contribution. And by all the audits that have been published over the years, the UK remains lagging behind its own obligations. And yet they paint these few million pounds, whatever, being given in foreign aid, they call it, foreign aid, yes, as being too much and not deserved by the countries. And they don't publish. They don't publish the data, they don't publish the accounts, they don't publish the breakdown of how much the UK pays. And they hide the real return that the UK receives in exchange for this so-called aid, that the UK exaggerates its own, the UK government, the state, exaggerates its foreign aid, quote, payments, and it completely conceals the greater amount of benefit and profits that it receives from the countries that are supposedly being given foreign aid by the UK. And this line about China, this propaganda is motivated by the political point-scoring narrative and agenda. But if they actually broke down, given the breakdown of the exchanges between China and the UK, it would be more realistic and more kind of easier to assess the actual extent of the payments by Britain and receipts by Britain. But they don't give that, which takes us back to the point that every day decisions must be published by the media. They don't. So what they're doing, they're publishing slogans, claims, allegations, sneer and smear against one another, if that is the case. Like, for example, in the Daily Mail today, the line they're kind of peddling is the hints of contradictions between Sunak, the finance minister, and Johnson. But they're not telling the truth of the actual reason for the rift. And the real reason for the rift is the competition to hide the truth. Competition on both sides to hide the truth and peddle a line. But to peddle the line of lying to suit the individual pursuant of the particular line. Sunak has been frequently kind of cited as a likely successor to Johnson because, as the propaganda says, he has been able to insert money into the situation where a large number of people have been, at least, even if falsely and temporarily and inadequately, assured that the government is taking care of them to some extent. So that's the image of Sunak as compared with the image of Johnson. And Johnson's image is universally that of dysfunction, lack of care, and contempt. Now, Sunak doesn't come across as a contemptuous or incompetent person, despite his political allegiance being very similar to Johnson's. In fact, he was one of the, late in the day, but he was one of the fiercest backers of the Johnson leadership during the 6 months prior to the leadership and prior to the election. So they are not talking about the actual maths. They're not giving the actual details of the situation on the ground on anything. And today's Daily Mail is as bad as yesterday's Daily Mail. And this is a rare piece in the Daily Mail on the inside page, page 21. They've got fraud soars to 1 million a day, 1 million pounds a day, but banks return less to victims. So banks are refusing to hand over money recovered from fraudster. That's normal. And this news is unusual because even this kind of confession by the Daily Mail about the culture of criminality that banks are is rare. It should be the kind of news that the Daily Mail and its group should publish every single day. Because every single day, banks are looting and robbing customers and the public. And there is a financial kind of apartheid that exists and is getting worse by the minute in this country, where millions of people are denied financial services that they're supposed to be entitled to. And we shall devote a whole detailed kind of section of this program, not this edition necessarily, but this program to the lack of financial services, the denial of financial services to most people in need. Financial services, not debt, not benefit. Services at reasonable rates of whatever costs that service is provided at. Even that is not available. And there is no platform or forum where the victims of the denial of financial services can seek redress. There is no court system. There is no access to the court system, the court bureaucracy. And when there is access, there is no justice for the victims. The majority of the victims of financial apartheid are denied any say or hearing or fair hearing in the corrupt, criminally operated court system in this country. And they have got 2 pages. On the one hand, they are blaming Harry and Meghan for spending £250,000 or whatever on their African trip. And on the other, they have got a 2-page spread, at the center of which is the one and only Kate Middleton. I mean, Kate Middleton is the next best thing after the Queen, according to the Daily Mail. And Meghan Markle is the worst thing that has happened to this country. And Meghan Markle is not even black. Her father is white. So she is not black. If she were black, they would completely banish her. She is mixed race background, and even that is not acceptable to the racists. So that's what they're doing. The Mail, the scum, they're having a go at Meghan Markle and Harry, and they're promoting Kate for the last few days. Now, this is the obituary that they're running by Richard K. on Harold Evans. Now, this is headline, Colossus who humbled the mighty. Well, that's a lie. Harold Evans was investigative editor and all the rest of it. And I have said, even before the news, coincidentally, I said 2 days previously about Harold Evans conducting the investigation at the Sunday Times into the distillers company over that thalidomide drug. I said that 2 days before he passed away. So it was contextually nothing to do with any sense on my part that he was going to be in the news as having passed away. I was giving him credit for that particular investigation role that he played at the Sunday Times, which was years before Murdoch took over the Sunday Times and the Times. And Harold Evans did do the investigation, and he did other investigations as well. But to say that he humbled the mighty is not factually sustainable, because he may have done that particular investigation into the distillers company, which it appears from reports yesterday was the biggest advertiser or source of advertising revenue for the Sunday Times at that time. So that was quite a decision he made, and it is absolutely laudable that he did that, and did defy that, and he took on the biggest advertiser to the Sunday Times and exposed their criminality and their role. And that campaign actually contributed to the change in the distillers company's position about paying compensation to the identified victims of the drug thalidomide and all kinds of disabilities and dysfunctions and disfigured children and their families were able to receive higher amounts of compensations from the distillers company directly as a result of the pressure that Harold Evans created on the company by his investigative journalism. That is fine. But to say that he humbled the mighty includes all the other mighties, and he didn't. In fact, in later years, long after that campaign by the Sunday Times, under his editorship, Harold Evans kind of criticized the kind of propensity or inclination on the part of certain journalists to do too much investigative journalism. Not only that, he was a kind of flag carrier of most of the establishment in this country, regardless of whatever investigation he did and whatever he unearthed about the establishment. He remained a loyal fan of most of the establishment in this country. And I have read Evans's story, and I have read about Evans throughout the decades, and I have seen no evidence that Evans actually confronted the ideology, the narrative, or the status quo. And I shall be reading more of this obituary this week, because Harold Evans, without a doubt, was a significant journalist despite his political affiliations. And I'm saying that because I don't want to deny him the credit that he deserves correctly for taking on Distillers Company. That is the biggest thing that he did. He did other investigative work, but Distillers Company was the biggest achievement in his record. All the other stuff that he did about photography, editing pictures and editing newspapers and all the rest of it, they were laudable, and they were from the empirical kind of store that he had gathered in his life of the long time as a craftsman. But he became part and parcel of the establishment, and he became an apologist for the establishment. Now, I want to see any mention in any obituary or any report about Evans on any stand he took against Tony Blair or any imperialistic adventures, any poverty creation across the world by the colonialists, and any cause that he should have taken up on behalf of collectively victims of racism, victims of anti-Muslim hatred and incitement. And in the decades that I have been studying the publications that Evans has been associated with and studying about his kind of role as a journalist, as an editor, I have not come across any of the reports that he should have commissioned, led, and actually been identified with against colonialism, against racism, against worldwide hunger and poverty creation, against worldwide wars, trade, arms sales. Nothing. There is no investigation. There is no evidence that I can see or I can recall at this stage. If somebody does a deep research and discovers something that is still unpublished and unknown about Harold Evans' opposition to racism, opposition to creating hunger across the world, across Africa and Asia and Latin America, then I would be more than willing to review what I have just said. If not, there is no need for me to review what I've just said. And so therefore, without evidence to the contrary to what I have said actually, this headline by the Daily Mail is unjustified on the facts. I'm not saying that they shouldn't devote a long spread on Harold Evans, because compared to the most of the editors and journalists, he deserves a space. But not that headline. He did not humble the mighty. He was, in effect, part and parcel of the agenda and the narrative on most of the activities of the mighty. The states, the big business, the arms traders, and the rest of them. Now, the Daily Mail has also on the same pages, page 24, this piece about this woman. She looks very much kind of acceptable to the Daily Mail. She is black, but she is mixed race. And that is called the mixed race syndrome. Racists in this country prefer mixed race kind of persons to ordinary people from ordinary black or African or Asian backgrounds. And that is a racist extension of racism. And that's what they actually do. And this person, the black barrister, Alexander Wilson, is of mixed race. I'm not against mixed race persons getting that coverage. But what I'm pointing out is that the mixed race persons get the treatment that is not generally given to people of African or Asian backgrounds without any mixed racial background. That is the racism of the Daily Mail. And the Fleet Street today about the person Alexander Wilson, 25-year-old licensed law trading barrister who was 3 times in a single day treated as a defendant. Now that actually highlights the fact of the racism of the court system. The security person mistakes her as a defendant. The other licensed law trader, whoever, because they said that a member of her profession, which would be either a solicitor or a barrister, licensed law trader, and a court kind of official. The 3 of them mistake a barrister, licensed law trader barrister, for a defendant. Shows that the perception, active perception, this week, actively raging within the court system is that black persons, African people, even the person of manifestly, demonstrably mixed racial identity are more likely to be defendants accused of crimes or offenses or wrongdoing than their counterparts, let's say from the indigenous population. So this is the tip of the iceberg once again, despite the fact that she has been given a coverage by the Fleet Street, which is denying, just as it is denying the truth and the facts and the evidence about the robbery of most people, most days, by the banking system, by the big business, by the offshore economy, offshore UK economy, offshore City of London economy. The truth is that they are hiding the truth. And so they're making everything that is wrong appear to be right. This item about Alexander Wilson is being presented as an exception. But I can say that every day, including this week, when the ban on eviction proceedings in the courts has been lifted, people have been denied access to the court system, access to the service that is supposed to be available to litigants in person and complainants and claimants against all kinds of wrongdoing decision makers in local councils, in businesses, in other situations. So the presumption that a woman looking, let's say half kind of African and half European kind of background, even her is more likely to be a defendant, a criminal, a wrongdoer. That is the dominant, that is the expression, that is the tip of the iceberg of the dominant perception, racist perception and obstruction. So anyone going into the court, for example, going through their security, because all the courts have got the security kind of check. So you have to empty your pockets and take all the metals out and let the detective system detect anything that is wrong. So you have to do that every time you go in there. And there are people obviously manning and womaning the system. And the stare that Black people, Asian people get on the whole is a negative, hostile stare or suspicious, to say the least. So why is that being allowed? Why is nobody taking action against these stares? Now, if there are, let's say, 500 encounters every single day, imagine the number every week, and imagine the number every year. So annually, hundreds of thousands of incidents are happening throughout the court system, the so-called legal system. The incidents are denying legal rights or legally claimed rights even before the actual litigation event is aired or kind of discussed in a room in the court. And then outside of these, there are more people being denied access to legal redress through the legal system, because the licensed law traders don't take on clients. I mean, it is a struggle to find a licensed law trader taking on a case. First of all, most people in ordinary life lack the kind of money that the licensed law traders demand. And the other thing is that with the increasing reduction of the fee that was available to licensed law traders appearing in the name of people in low income, that has been cut every week, every year for the last 10 years. It was being cut before, but it has been cut more drastically. So none of the newspapers and none of the coverages of this Alexander Wilson has got any contextual reference to the fact that people of African and Asian backgrounds and identities are discriminated against more vigorously and more fiercely by the court system and the court personnel and the legal profession, so-called. So that's the sickness of the Daily Mail and the racist kind of other titles. Now they're saying that the people in their 90s are likely to lose their lives due to the virus. More people in their 90s. So there is a big piece about Trevor McDonald. Trevor McDonald, who was the presenter of ITN News, and he started with the Channel 4 News. When I took a picture of him outside the Conway Hall, at the very start of the career at Channel 4 News, Trevor McDonald asked me, "Why are you taking my picture?" So I told him, because your picture keeps appearing everywhere, so I want to put a context, words to that effect. I don't remember the actual words that exchanged between him and me. But he was not happy that I was taking his picture. Was it because of what he perceived I was? Or would he have said the same thing if I had a different ethnic appearance or background? And there is this piece in the I newspaper where Lenny Henry, another like Trevor McDonald, has been adopted by the racist media as an acceptable black person. And there is similarity between the role played by Trevor McDonald, who was completely echoing the racist stereotypes and the racist narrative. But he didn't do the grotesque crime, additional crimes that has been perpetrated by Trevor Terrible Phillips. So this one I don't call Trevor Terrible McDonald, I call him Trevor McDonald, because despite his role as a surrogate to the racist agenda, he didn't commit any of the crimes that brazenly committed by Trevor Terrible Phillips, who is the mental slave, officially treated as the mental slave for the racists in Britain and has been for decades. Lenny Henry started his comedy or comic career by taking the mick, that is, by mouthing and performing anti-Africans kind of jokes, so-called. His entire comedy stock was based on insulting the African stereotypes, insulting the Caribbeans to a lesser extent, but he started by mainly attacking the Africans. So, I mean, he is of African descent. He's from the Caribbean background, but he is of African descent. For him to do that, nobody, neither the ITV network, which is where he appeared, and the BBC, neither the ITV nor the BBC stopped and wondered why they were allowing this anti-black propaganda by this black-faced surrogate. So they built him up as a kind of comedian. He's a mainstream comedian. And when he got there, mainstream, he reduced the number of his attacks on the black background and black identity. And he kept reducing and kept reducing, and he reduced it to such an extent that in this piece, he is saying that the music, classical music industry in this country is racist. So this is the diagnostic analysis of the paper, and we're not going to even read anything more about him after what I have said in summary about his life. Now this is Sunak still getting a positive kind of plug by the I newspaper. Despite the fact that they are saying that he is bringing an end to the parlor scheme. And there is this piece about the black barrister is repeat victim of mistaken identity. I would not say that was mistaken identity at all. That is the intentional racist lack of recognition of black people. That is what that is. It's not a mistaken identity, as I have said. And the experience of the average black person in this context, and as in every context except in the strictly biological kind of examinations, black includes the experience of black people, includes the experience of people from African and Asian background. That is fact, empirical evidence. That's why I redefined black decades ago as including African people or people of African background and people of Asian background, because the effect and the intention to discriminate against African people and Asian people based on the broad kind of agenda and perception of ethnicity, race, and racial discrimination and racial differences, racial origin and identities. These are similar, not exactly identical to one another, but they're very similar. So therefore, people who are targeted by racists, targeted by anti-black kind of attitude, outlook, policies, discrimination, obstructions, and barriers, are wider definition black people, because they're treated as being as African people are treated as all the other people. And that, on that definition, must include people, all the Asian people or Asian background. And among the Asian people, there are various differences, racial, ethnic, religious, and all the other differences. Huge difference. But when it comes to racism, it of course refers to the racism, discrimination, and denial meted out by the racists who identify themselves as descendants of colonists and colonialists. And so therefore, in the last 500 years, colonialists, in the main, when it comes to the main deprivation and robbery of the powers and entitlements and say, have been European. In the past, in previous eras, colonialists have included people from Asia and in Asia against other Asian people. But we are talking now about colonialism of the last 500 years, which have been dominated. The last 500 years, the colonialist occupations and behavior, impositions have been dominated by people you can call Western European people. So to them, black persons include African people and Asian people. So the obstructions that Alexander Wilson experienced, according to these reports, and these reports are of course from the same agency, the Press Association, and then these individual titles have kind of done their little editing and little alteration and fact checking. Essentially, it wasn't something that was witnessed by these papers or the reporters. It was something that was issued either by Alexander Wilson or on her behalf. And it was circulated by the news agency Press Association. As I said, that is the main syndication. I mean, all the stories, most of the domestic stories in this country, most stories are circulated by the Press Association. And the international so-called stories are circulated by two, the Reuters and the AFP, and some by the Associated Press of the USA. The Associated Press is the most well-known agency in the USA in context of the USA news. And Reuters and AFP, of course, are the next ones that cover the rest of the world. So they dominate. These three agencies dominate and have dominated the kind of perspective, if you like, and the news coverage, the news lines of the rest of the world, where most of the subscriptions are sold by these agencies. And China has got Xinhua news agency, but the Xinhua does not compete anywhere near with the Reuters market or the AFP's market or the market occupied by Associated Press of the USA. So when these agencies dominate the copy selling, they dominate the agenda as well. So despite the fact that the colonialism literally has ended in most countries and most regions in the world, the colonialist agenda has not ended, as I was saying earlier in the week about India and Pakistan. Bangladesh doesn't have any residual titles from the British Empire because most of the titles were based in Calcutta or Delhi or in Bombay. So they transferred hardly anything from these cities to Bangladesh, which became part of Pakistan in 1947. So the only remaining kind of title from the pre-1947 era was the Dawn newspaper that was published during the 1940s, and that was located after 1947 at Karachi, where it remains. So the agenda in the copying and in the writing of the media, English language, remains unaltered. There is no real independence and liberation and freedom from colonialism and imperialism as far as these people, either as subscribers in those countries across Asia and across Africa, subscribers of the news kind of service controlled by AFP, Reuters, and Associated Press. They don't alter anything. So the narrative of lying and pro-racist denial continues, persists. And that is the case with the narrative of, there are three people there. Rishi Sunak is not treated as a nation. He is treated as a conservative, which is the kind of complicated narrative that has been surrounding people like Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman is as corrupt as Grant Shapps, and she is as corrupt as the next conservative. And Sunak has not been caught doing any blatant corruption, but he is part of the hedge fund criminals. So he is corrupt to that extent, and that is one of the key reasons for his selection as the finance minister so far. And so the presentation of Trevor McDonald in the kind of mode that he was a ITN news presenter, News at 10 presenter, is significant because he is treated as a surrogate like Lenny Henry, but not in the way that Trevor Terrible McDonald, the mental slave, is. Trevor Terrible McDonald, Phillips, as opposed to Trevor McDonald, is given extra platforms to hit black people, African people, Muslims, whenever his racist controllers and agenda setters and endorsers decide his input and his appearance as a black-faced person doing the racist bidding is justifiable and usable. Trevor McDonald doesn't appear in those kind of forms, nor does Lenny Henry, despite the fact that between Henry and McDonald there are various empirical differences. And the Financial Times is saying that Sunak is targeting wage support. That is to say, he's going to hit the low-income people again. But then there's a subheading there, which includes the claim that German-style subsidy plan. So the Brexiteering Sunak in the Brexiteering Johnson's cabinet going to follow a German model. Can you believe that? And Germany, for all kinds of reasons, has been at the receiving end of the majority of the vicious anti-EU kind of taunts and complaints. And they're going back to Germany. And also, there are various German companies, German state-owned companies operating in this country, including the transport outfit called Arriva. So the Brexit myth will be kind of exposed increasingly. And the Financial Times also reports this, that there is a low isolation rates after test. And this is in the context of a piece they're saying that there is warning that this low isolation rates after test will be heightening fears about rising case numbers. That's the Financial Times second lead on the front page. And on the page 3, the Financial Times saying that there is a crisis, financial crisis, which forces Sunak to walk a tightrope. And there is a graph, and there is business groups are raising fears over mass loss of jobs. And they're publishing a claim that the NHS is shaping up to tackle the virus surge and the capacity in the provision of health care for the victims. That is the claim. And there is a piece on the Financial Times, page 4, that there are increasing protests against Donald Trump, threatening not to leave the White House if he is defeated. And he's being reminded of the tradition of leaving dating back to the time of George Washington. And there are other pieces about Mexico's populist president facing growing backlash in Mexico because of the crisis. And there is a crisis on tackling the pandemic in India. And there is a report about China saying that the Muslim concentration camp operated by China is getting bigger. So more and more Muslims are being put in the concentration camp by China, which is using the camps as cheap labor, the cheapest possible labor. And they're raping the women, and they're violating the entire Muslim community of Uyghur community and other Muslims, because in China, Uyghurs are the known quantity because of the large numbers of that community being put in concentration camp and punished in other ways by China. But China is a big country in the Asian continent, and it has got many ethnic groups that are also Muslim. There are many Christian people as well, Buddhist people, but there are many ethnic groups of Muslims who are not in the news but who are being treated equally with hostility by the Chinese regimes. Now, there is a belated news item about the kind of action taken against a former director of Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is the Facebook-linked corruption of democracy and public life outfit that sabotaged democracy in the 2016 referendum here and USA presidential election that went in favor of the Cambridge Analytica's role favored Donald Trump in 2016. And there is a piece by Philip Stevens in the Financial Times where Donald Trump is being supported by Turkey's president, Russia's Putin, and the Saudi Arabian Salman, who has been linked with the decision to order the murder of the Washington Post linked journalist Khashoggi. And the Financial Times has got an editorial about the US Senate and its duty to the justice system. Now, the Financial Times doesn't publish anything about the dysfunctioning judicial bureaucracy in this country. So for it to opine about the US Senate and its duty to the US judicial system is irresponsible and dishonest and corrupt, because it should be concentrating on the dysfunction and criminality and racism dominating the UK judicial bureaucracy. And there is nothing in the Financial Times today about the lifting of the ban from the proceedings in courts for evicting people. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to be treated to eviction kind of rubber stamping by the numerically mainly the county courts. And the Boris graph, daily Boris graph, is confessing with a picture of Sunak. It's saying that we have to face up to the hard choices. So this is an admission of failure by the Brexiteering cabal fronted by Johnson. Same thing on The Guardian. But they are not giving the details. None of the papers is giving the backgrounds to this story, and most certainly not publishing the details of the majority of the people being affected by the decision to withdraw the support that affects the majority of the low-income people. So we shall be continuing in the next edition of this program, covering some of the detailed items and updating on what the actual criteria of measuring the losses and damages caused by the combined negligence and racism and criminality of the Tower Hamlets Council, Tower Hamlets Community Housing, the Queen's Bench Division, Newham Council, and others. The combined losses that we have been saying, the amount exceed the amounts of the combined wealth as reported about Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates. And that is actually a tip of the iceberg, because the work that they have affected the racists and criminals in Tower Hamlets Council, racists and criminals in Newham Council, racists and criminals in making the decisions in the name of the Queen's Bench Division in the High Court, and the criminals operating in the local business court, Spitalfield Small Business Association. Then those criminals' work and obstruction and criminality and denials have denied the people, billions of people in Africa and Asia, of the benefit that exceeds many times over the known wealth of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos, to begin with the four. But even if the others, including Apple computer, known wealth is added, it still would be nothing as compared to the damage and losses they have caused by interfering with and obstructing and delaying and denying the work that would have saved hundreds of millions of people's lives and livelihoods, and would have positively affected billions of people across Africa, Asia, and the rest of the world.